Around the world, there are a number of places that are named very ominously. The disappearances that we're about to discuss each took place in areas with interesting names that make you wonder how they might have earned their name in the first place. They also have their own unique and odd elements to them. The first disappearance takes us to the Devil's Den State Park, where Rodney Letterman went missing when he was 33 years old. He and a friend of his had travelled together to the park on the 27th of August 2017. The pair camped out in the park that night and all was well. They had plans the following day to set out and hike the Butterfield Trail, which begins in the park and continues through the Ozark Mountains. In total, this loop is just shy of 15 miles whose terrain varies. While on this trail, it takes its hikers through creeks, up high ridges, past waterfalls and caves. What we know about Rodney through his wife Stacia was that he suffered from high blood pressure, for which he required daily medication to keep in check. On the day of the hike, Rodney and his friend drove to the start of the trail, parked up and began on their journey. However, there was a problem. Around a mile into this hike, Rodney needed to rest and sat down on the trail. It appears as though he had forgot to bring his medication, which had been left in the car. He told his friend what was going on, and this person then began the lonely trek back to the car. This trek was obviously made quite quickly, and the friend was able to retrieve the medication without a problem. However, another predicament, perhaps far more serious, would arise. Upon returning to the spot the pair had stopped, Rodney wasn't there. The friend began to look around the immediate area, but he could find no sign of Rodney. The question must immediately become, why did Rodney leave? At the time of his disappearance, he had 1.5 litres of water on his person, so it's not as though he was at immediate risk of dehydration and could have stayed put. More likely is that he may have been having a bad episode with his high blood pressure. When hypertension becomes quite bad, the sufferer can have severe headaches, nosebleeds, fatigue, confusion, and vision problems, etc. There are two scenarios that come to mind at this stage, being that if confusion had onset alongside a massive headache, he could very well have been disoriented, perhaps even forgetting what he was doing and wandered away into the wilderness. Another scenario might have been as a result of hallucinations. When these episodes occur, a number of people have reported hallucinating, so it could be that he thought he saw something and either wanted to leave or follow. It's important to note though, that the reason Rodney left has never been ascertained. Those are just my best guesses at trying to make sense of the situation, given what was reportedly happening at the time. With that being said though, there are other details that may make this situation seem a bit more unusual. When the search for Rodney failed, the friends sounded the alarm and alerted the authorities. The search for Rodney was well put together and ended up being quite extensive. In the vicinity of Devil's Den State Park, they had searchers on horseback, ATVs, on foot, drones, a helicopter with thermal imaging technology, and search dogs too. Over the following week, the search teams had scoured over 4,000 acres, both in and surrounding the park. These searches would uncover a number of discoveries. On one particular trail in the area were a number of primitive campsites, and at one of these sites, Rodney's mobile phone, phone charger and flashlight were found. It's important to note that at this site there was no evidence of a struggle or anything of that nature, so it didn't appear that Rodney had an altercation with another person. Obviously, Rodney wasn't found along with the equipment. What we know is that Letterman had some medical conditions and his medications were left in the friend's vehicle, said Lieutenant Brett Hagan. We have analysed the phone and it has given us some leads, but we still have not been able to locate Letterman, Hagan said. At this point, we still do not know if something happened to Letterman at the park, if he got a ride out of there from another friend, or if there's any foul play. It's curious that the authorities said that the phone gave them some leads, given that the pair were in a wilderness area at the time of the disappearance. It's not clear to me what could have been relevant other than a plan Rodney had made, either to intentionally disappear or something else. I'm not sure, and to be clear, that is nothing more than speculation, but it's difficult to imagine what else could have possibly been relevant on the phone in this instance. In any case, there would be no further discoveries made, that is, until 18 months later. On February the 25th, 2019, a hiker spending time in Devil's Den State Park came across a skull and remains in the woods next to a hiking trail. These remains would be sent to the Arkansas State Crime Lab for further examination, and is where they were confirmed as belonging to Rodney. According to StrangeOutdoors.com, park officials said the area where the remains were found was 3 miles away from the visitors center, and was actually on private land surrounded by the US Forest Service property. That area is generally inaccessible, and Tim Scott, Devil's Den Park Assistant Superintendent, said he was surprised the hiker found the remains because the terrain is very rugged. As remote as that area is, there might be some hunters going there and a few hikers, but the location doesn't get much foot traffic or even wheeler traffic. Another point that's interesting about this discovery is that it appears as though the area the remains were found was searched almost 2 years prior in 2017, meaning that Rodney was found in an area that had been previously searched and must have arrived there sometime afterwards. It's never been understood what happened to Rodney, and almost every question remains unanswered. Why did he leave the area when his friend went to the car? Why did he seemingly abandon his equipment at a campsite? How did he evade all of the searches to end up in a place that had been previously searched? What leads did the authorities come up with in regards to the phone, and how could that have been relevant given the situation? In the end, it seems what happened to Rodney will never be fully understood. "68-year-old Kat Hammontre disappeared on the 11th of April 2019 during a hike in Mexico. 20 years prior, Kat moved to San Felipe from Seattle, and she hiked a lot and got to know numerous trails very well, perhaps making it all the more unusual that she disappeared along with her dog on one of said trails. On the day she went missing, Kat, along with her dog and a group of friends, 6 I believe, had travelled to Diablo Canyon in the San Pedro Matia Sierra. A short time into this hike, approximately 10 minutes, Kat had reportedly hurt her ankle and had to stop right next to a creek. Kat told her friends to continue on their hike and that she would sit beside the creek and wait for them. The trail her friends were now on would take them to a waterfall before looping back round to Kat, and this would take around 90 minutes in total. When they returned to Kat's location an hour and a half later, she and the dog were missing. The group thought that this was odd because Kat told them that she would wait there for them, but they didn't panic immediately. Instead, they questioned whether she might have just tried to make it back to the car park. Kat's husband, Warren, had come to pick her up, so he was at the car park at this time waiting for her. You can imagine everyone's surprise and immediate panic when the rest of the group came face to face with Warren, but Kat wasn't present with either. It was now, obviously, that all concerned realised that she was missing. I believe the group did go back and try to search for her, but when this failed, the authorities were made aware of what was going on. There wasn't much mention of the initial search effort, but we do know that a local search and rescue group came together and began searching the area around where she disappeared from, but they didn't find anything. It's a curious set of circumstances, because if Kat had hurt her ankle, that should have meant that she wasn't going to be walking very far. So how did she leave the area so efficiently? And by that, I mean she must have somehow gotten far enough away to avoid the searching parties. It makes you wonder what this might have looked like and what was going on. Was there some kind of third-party involvement here that was responsible for moving Kat? There were no signs of a struggle. The ground in the area that Kat was sitting hadn't been disturbed. That doesn't necessarily mean that a third party wasn't there, but there was certainly no evidence left behind of that. This is a situation where animal predation can likely be ruled out because there was no evidence present of that, and it's usually very apparent. At some point during the search, 2 hidden marijuana plantations were found, but there was no mention as to whether they were suspected as being connected. Generally speaking, you have to imagine that those in charge of these kinds of operations would have wanted to remain hidden. And when a person goes missing in the surrounding area, the chances of being discovered go through the roof. Given that it would be in their best interest to not have someone go missing, it seems unlikely, though of course we'll never know for sure. When the searching had failed, it did escalate from there, and the Mexican military were brought in to take over the search. With them came more advanced equipment such as helicopters and thermal imaging technology, and I believe more dogs were brought in too. This search would fail too though. Here's a quote from the Mexico Daily News. "It is believed that Kat cannot have strayed far from her last known whereabouts. Where daytime temperatures have been reaching 32 degrees Celsius due to poor health. Yesterday evening, Civil Protection Chief Antonio Resquilas announced that the search was being called off and that the case had been turned over to the State Attorney General's office, which will continue to investigate and attempt to locate the missing woman. We suspended the search. We combed the area surrounding the spot where she was last seen. A 5-kilometer perimeter, and we did not find her," said Antonio yesterday evening. The search lasted for about a week before being suspended. Clearly something was amiss in this disappearance, and there are some unusual aspects to consider. Firstly, I know a lot of people are interested in this aspect, so I'll mention it here. The search dogs never found Kat's scent, despite being in the exact location she disappeared from. Secondly, Kat had a lighter on her, but she never made a beacon, or at least nothing like that was ever seen. Why? Thirdly, the dog was known to bark a lot, yet this was never heard either. The police themselves were comprehensive in their questioning, and all members of the group spoke with the police individually. The end result of that was that the police came away satisfied that they hadn't done anything untowards. Again, it was questioned whether she had just gotten lost, but the husband said that she had actually fractured her foot before this hike, and her ankle or foot started to hurt while walking. So he said it's unlikely that she could have gotten very far. This was the opinion of the group too. The nearest road was miles away from where she was, so I can't imagine that a vehicle was involved here. As for a third party, it would still have meant carrying someone through harsh and rugged terrain. While not impossible, it seems unlikely at first glance. Ultimately, something happened to Kat while she was sat at the creek with her dog. What was it? And how did she get away fast enough so that there was absolutely no trace left behind of her? It seems at this point, we'll never know for sure. Now let's talk about the final disappearance. Todd William Hofflander was 39 years old when he disappeared in Hell's Canyon, located in the Windy Saddle area of Idaho County. At this time, Todd had been helping his friends scout mule deer bucks between Windy Saddle and McAfee Cabin. On the day of Todd's disappearance, the 27th of September 2010, he wasn't alone that day and was spending time with his friends. However, they planned to separate and take different paths through Hell's Canyon to meet up again at Snake River. We'll come back to this point shortly. It was during this point of separation that something went awry for Todd. While his friends would reach Snake River, Todd would never be seen again. Even at this stage, Todd wasn't completely alone. Ruby, his black Labrador retriever, was with him the entire time. The group planned to meet up the day afterwards on the 28th, and this is of course when they came to the realization that Todd had gone missing. They knew the general route that Todd took, and they backtracked to see if they could find any sign of him or Ruby. They couldn't. After the failed search by the friends, they contacted the authorities and the real search effort began. Aerial grid searches were made by helicopters equipped with thermal imaging technology alongside the many ground searches with dogs present. The search didn't result in Todd being found, but a couple of days into the search, Ruby was located. She was found by searchers near milepost 15 on 7 Devils Road, south of Riggins. This was the opposite side of the 7 Devils mountain range where Todd was last seen. The searchers did try to have Ruby lead them to Todd, but sadly she wasn't able to. The surrounding areas to which Ruby was discovered were searched thoroughly multiple times, but again, they couldn't locate Todd. A post was made on a forum by the user New Boots of Idaho. This is the woman who found Ruby with her husband. I quote, "My husband and I were the ones who found Ruby on Friday. We stopped for lunch at a parking area for hunters about mile 15. We did see where she came from. She came downhill and sat near the fence and cattle guard growling at us, whining and pacing. We had our mini dachshund with us. She was obviously scared." Another group of photographers pulled up in a truck. They had dog food, water and dishes, and when we put them down and called her again, she came bounding, tail between her legs, but happy. We petted her and asked her, "Where's Todd?" She became very excited and danced all around. We called out many times for Todd, and later my husband and I explored the area a bit more, but to no avail. We were not equipped for a detailed search. The area was shortly thereafter thoroughly searched, but Todd wasn't found. Now later, we find out why the group separated. Todd's wife would reveal at the time Todd had injured his knee and was going to take an easier route down to Snake River. It's not clear if all members of the group were alone or had split into smaller groups, but Todd was alone. In hindsight, this was not a good idea, and actually, even with foresight, it is probably not a good idea to have the injured person travel alone. Leaving that can of worms unopened, let's move to April 2020, around 10 years after this incident. Todd's remains would be undiscovered until this time, where a hunter found a skull above Bernard Creek. The hunter would then go on to find a pack containing camping gear and a camera. These items would be proven as belonging to Todd, and the remains would be positively identified as belonging to Todd too, though they weren't identified until January of 2021. So I suppose in the end, the question becomes, what actually happened here? Did Todd reach a situation in which his injury caused him to succumb? Or did something else happen? How did he actually end up so far from the rest of the group? Did he just get lost? How did he and Ruby get separated? Or did she leave after Todd had passed away? It seems that these questions will never be fully understood. I'd just like to take the time to thank you for watching, and a big thank you to the patrons who've been running around on the screen. If you found the video interesting, then please do leave a like, hit the bell and subscribe if you haven't already. If not, then feel free to leave a dislike. I'm just looking for your honest opinion either way. I hope that you've had a great day or evening depending on where you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Be safe guys. Peace.